Welcome all. And tonight I'd like to explore the subject of brotherhood. And there's two reasons for that. One, because I think the concept of brotherhood in the Jewish world at the moment is being pushed to the limit. And two, because the parasha of the week gives us amazing insight and direction into what is true brotherhood and the extent to which it stretches. I'm sorry if you can hear those clicking background noises, but somehow my printer woke up and decided to make those noises totally unsolicited. Anyway, he's going to keep quiet until the end of the shiur. Hopefully. The discussion on Israeli politics at the moment keeps on coming up with this phrase, Israel is on the brink of civil war. In America, they call it oxymorons. Here it's an oxymoron, whichever way you call it. There is absolutely nothing civil about war. So that expression, civil war, makes very, very little sense. And yes, things are tense. But in Hebrew, a civil war is referred to as a milchemet achim. Achim we now mean the milchama, war, and brothers. And I think that says it all. And this is what pushed me to explore not just the concept of Jewish civil war, which, please God, is something that doesn't ever erupt, but also the concept of brotherhood, which I'm going to show you as a theme in the parasha of the week. This is a fascinating story that is brought down in Chronicles. Chronicles 2, I think it is 28th chapter. There's a civil war between the two kingdoms, and it discusses that the Israelites, that's from the northern provinces, captured 200,000 of the kinsmen, women, boys, and girls, as well as booty, and they're bringing it back up north to Samaria with them. And the prophet, who treats this very harshly, and I'm skipping some verses, but this is how he rebukes them. And he says, do you now intend to subjugate the men and women of Judah and Jerusalem to be your slaves? As it is, you have nothing but offenses against Hashem, and convinces them that they've got to return all of the captives back home, because Hashem is upset with them. And in fact, this is what happens. The chiefs go ahead and confront those who come back from the campaign, from the war, and they say, no, you're not bringing the captives back here. Hashem's upset with us. The prophet has shared this with us, and we're not taking these captives. And the soldiers release the captives, and then the people who are mentioned by names in the previous verse, and I'm quoting selectively over here, take the captives in hand, and with the booty they clothed the naked among them, clothed them, shod them, gave them to eat and drink, anointed them, provided donkeys for all who were failing, and brought them to Jericho, a city of palms, back to the kingdom. Then they returned to Samaria. So that's an account of a war that seems to end well, with hundreds of thousands, it seems, of captives being returned home, but being treated unbelievably well by their brothers. And this story is referred to in Rashi when it discusses war, but real war, not civil war, but war against enemies. And this is not in Chronicles, this is in the book of Devarim, when Jewish people are about to go out to war, so there's a special Kohen, that is Meshuach L'chama. He has been anointed for the purpose of leading the Jews into war. And this Kohen speaks to them and says, you're about to join battle with the enemy, and be brave. Be brave, don't fear them, don't panic. And Rashi's comment is the following there. Rashi says, these are apparently redundant words, but he's saying, remember, these are not your brethren. If you fall into your hands, they will have no pity on you. This is not the war of Judah against Israel, which is in the book of Chronicles. And he quotes the verse that I just showed you, where there was particularly amazingly good treatment of the captives who were then taken back. And the point is, that is not how a war with the real enemy happens. And the implication is, even though there may be a milchemet achim, we're mindful of the fact that we are brothers at all times. And that's something we need to remember and keep in mind as we pray, first of all, for a peaceful resolution to the war that Israel is currently fighting against its real enemy, and of course the tension that is boiling within Israeli society at the moment. So, where am I leading you? Straight into the Parsha of the week, which is a portion of Bahar that has mention of the word brothers repeatedly. And what I found fascinating is that it refers to Jews and their mutual relationship as brothers in a whole range of forms of relationship down the social ladder, from equals to that which one may consider to be lesser than us, and that relationship of achim remains there all the time. And there are those that are equal to us kind of society, and there are those that we for some reason consider to be lesser in society, and it's probably more difficult to relate to somebody who is down the ladder as a brother, but the Torah is going to enjoin us that this is something that we're going to do at all times. So let's do a study of the occurrences of the word brother in this portion, Bahar. If we can find it. Here we are. And here's the first one. The first one refers to, that's the first one. The other one was the second one. The first one refers to, and let me give you some context. The context is that we introduced to the laws of Jubilee, Yovel. Jubilee laws tell us that fields are never sold in perpetuity, that it's always a leasehold of 49 years or at maximum, and that when we get to the Jubilee year, we are going to have to release our fields, and they're going to go back to the original owners who will always remain with their ancestral land. That gives a very interesting fluctuation into the real estate and the property market, the market of fields. We're talking about agricultural lands here. So why so? Because if you're selling a property in year one of the 49-year cycle, it'll roughly be worth 50 times more than if you're selling it in year 49, because then the person is only going to have it for 1 year. So the prices of fields obviously go down as we get closer to the Jubilee. And here we are being told that as a result, we must be fair in the way we charge for fields, because we're not selling them forever. It's only going to be a leasehold. And therefore, depending on how many years are left before you get to the Jubilee, one should charge accordingly only for the remaining crop years leading in. And we are told about the laws of onna'ah, of not cheating, not wronging another in business, which applies not just to this concept, but it's introduced to us over here by telling us be fair in the way you assess the price of a property both ways. Purchaser or seller. It's worded here clearly. You sell your property to your neighbor, or you buy from your neighbor. You shall not wrong one another. Shall not try to cheat you. What is a fixed price per square meter, dunam, whatever it is, hectare. It's easier, but this is in a market where the prices change every year, which opens up the possibility of cheating. And how is the relationship between potential, buyer, seller of a property referred to as achiv, brother? Okay, in this English is as raw one another, but clearly you can see the word brother is here. Do not cheat one another. Do not take advantage of your brother. Now, this is a relationship which essentially is, on par. You have two people. One has a field that he wishes to sell, rent out. The other one, has money which he'd like to invest, and it's a mutually beneficial transaction. That's what sales of properties usually are in most cases. So we're talking about people who are, let's call them equals in society, business people who are buying from one another, referred to as brothers. And that's kind of at the top of the equality rung before we start looking at discrepancies in terms of standing. And this is where the word brother appears the very first time in the parasha. But let's read on. This is the second instance. Here we're no longer talking about an equal relationship. We're talking about a person who has had to sell his property because it's fallen on hard times. It's not just a business transaction. And once again, he's referred to as achicha, as your brother. And the mitzvah is that you're supposed to redeem the family land. So a relative comes along and tries to buy it back. If that's not possible, then the seller himself can try and raise the money, and there's a mitzvah for the purchaser to give it back. So that's all explained, or not give it back, but sell it back, and that's all explained in the Torah in more detail. But here we're finding that it's shifted somewhat. We no longer talk about two people who are in equal kind of standing and they just try to exchange things. This is somebody who's fallen on hard times, need to raise cash very quickly, and so he's selling off property. So he's at I would say, slightly lower standing, and the Torah still refers to the relationship as achicha, achiv, brothers. So we can see that although there's a bit of a shift in the mutual relationship, the term of how we're relating to one another remains one of achim. And then we read on. And here we are talking about somebody who's really fallen on hard times. And this is where the Torah prohibits the taking of interest. And a couple of interesting things. Clearly, somebody's fallen on hard times. And it's not a case that he's able to just go and sell off property to raise money. He's really in trouble. And he needs to come and borrow. So first of all, Shri pointed out that the Torah says, you must literally strengthen him, build him up. You must try and raise him up, even before we get to the point where you're lending him money, and we're told, we're not going to allow you to collect interest. Even before that, try and raise him up, try and put him up on his feet. And sometimes, lending money helps. Sometimes it's just offering a job. Sometimes it's giving business advice. But the metaphor Rashi gives, he says, if an animal is walking and it's kind of, tottering and losing its balance, one person can probably stand next to the animal and help him, steady himself. Once the animal has fallen aside, the load has shifted, it's going to take 5 people to raise him up. So you always want to anticipate a potential a fall and raise the person up. That's a greater mitzvah. And then lending money is providing the person with skills or with business advice, and building him up in that way. But the point is, if you do end up lending him money, then it's what we call it in Hebrew, gmilut chasadim. It's bestowing kindness, and there may not be an interest consideration. If it is a business investment, then you're entitled to become a partner with somebody in a business. But if it's a simple and straight loan, it should not be done. In fact, there is a process where you want to lend somebody money which you cannot afford to simply give it away to them without any consideration of interest at all. Then what you can do is what's called a heter iska, where you enter into a form of partnership agreement where you assume some risk in that loan by being a partner with the person in whatever endeavor, and then obviously because you're assuming some risk, you're also entitled to a return should the business end up going well. And once again, I need to point out that the person is being referred to as achicha, as your brother. So even though here clearly the inequality has shifted even more, because you're the guy with the bucks. He's the one who's coming cap in hand, asking you please to help him, to assist him, to lend him money, to put his business back on its feet or whatever. But the relationship has got to be one of respect, all the time. I was chatting to some youngsters who, were looking to, for jobs and to make money, and they pointed out to me that they tried waiting on tables in restaurants, and they found the experience extremely humiliating because the customers come into restaurants and look down at a waiter, and it was foreign to me because I've never felt that way, and I've never ever looked down at a waiter. Yes, I mean they're providing a service, and they're probably not getting the kind of salaries, usually students or people of lower income, but I've never kind of looked down at people who are performing a more menial task. But it seems that is something that is quite prevalent in society, and this reading the Parsha is a wake-up call to appreciating how we must treat people on equal footing. We must consider our fellows to be brothers. And we're going to take it down a couple of more levels. So here is the next time the Parsha talks about brothers. And this is now, sorry about that, this is not even one rung down the scale. Your brother is in trouble, and he has sold himself into slavery. He sold himself into slavery. And Achicha, the Torah continues to refer to this fellow as your brother. And it's interesting to note, and we're going to spend a couple of minutes on this, but the laws of slavery in the Torah, probably for its time, the most progressive. This was an era when slaves had no rights. They were treated like cattle and like animals, put to work and given no respect and no rights at all. And here we're being told, you have a slave, achicha. So there's no abolition of slavery altogether. That was something which came in centuries later. And the Torah doesn't abolish slavery because it's very much entrenched in society, but it gives laws that protect them. You may not subject them to slave treatment. What is that? It refers to the kind of work that you're going to give to him. You have to treat him like an employee, and it remains only until the Jubilee year. So once again, it's been a sale, but for a limited time. And eventually this individual is going to get his freedom back. He's going to go back to his family, and he's going to be a free man once again. And at that point, Jubilee year, he goes back, returns, and you can imagine what Jubilee does. I mean, it's kind of a great equalizer. All slaves go free, all properties go back, and there's an unbelievable celebration of that jubilation, celebration. It's called that because of the yovel, which is actually the horn that was blown to effect all of these freedoms. But it's a very joyous and happy time. And why is that? So he says, because they are my slaves. They says Hashem, I took you all out of Mitzrayim, and therefore you are slaves, and therefore there's no perpetual slavery. You cannot sell someone into slavery that will remain forever. Come Jubilee, they will come out, and they shall not be sold as mimkeret evet. So that means that there's no selling of an individual on the slave market. You used to have these platforms and put the slaves up. People would come and choose. Nor may you rule over them ruthlessly. And the Gemara gives various examples of giving somebody a job that has no purpose. There's no work today on the farm. You said to the slave, dig a hole here, make it 4 feet deep, and if I'm not back, then fill it back again. And the slave really, knows that he's just being kept busy with the hard labor, but he's not really accomplishing anything. So those are very progressive laws that protect the individual to the extent that the Gemara tells us if you purchase a slave, you bought for yourself a master. Because you have to treat him as an equal. If you sleep with 2 pillows, give him 2. If you sleep on a good mattress, they used to say the CD post-orthopedic, then you buy him a mattress of equal quality. So those are the laws protecting the slave. But I come back to the very first word. This is now a slave-master relationship, and it's achicha. He's still being referred to as your brother. And we take it to the next one. And this is now the individual who has sold himself into slavery to a Gentile. So the Jews living in the Holy Land, the Gentiles living in the Holy Land, and this fellow couldn't find any Jew who wanted to buy him as a slave. So he's now gone 1 notch lower, and he sold himself, it says, to Ger, Toshav, Mishpachat Ger, and the commentaries look at this, and they said, we're talking here about somebody who sold himself to even idol worship. In other words, he sold himself to go work in the temple of idolatry in order to make income. This is really somebody who, gone far down. There's a mitzvah to redeem him, even after he's now become the slave, and we want one of his Jewish brothers to redeem him, hopefully a family member or beyond that. And even though we have this total kind of social inequality here, of a Jewish slave now being sold to an idolater, it's still called achicha. He's still treated as your brother in these 2 verses. So that gives us an idea of that the Torah really telling us under all circumstances, whether it be a mutually beneficial business deal, or one who's selling property because of desperation, one who's coming cap in hand, one's even selling himself as a slave. And in this final example, one who has sold himself as a slave outside of his own faith remains achicha, remains your brother. And then at the end of the parasha, Hashem says the following to us: Ki bnei Yisrael avadim. The children of Israel are my slaves. Avadai heim, they are my slaves. To come out of Egypt, and the implication is my slaves, but nobody else's slaves. And so real slavery shouldn't exist. And we're talking, about employing somebody on a permanent basis for a lengthy period of time. We're not going to refer to that as slavery. So this is something that we cannot gloss over all the time. We are called Bnei Israel. What does that mean, Bnei Israel? Children of Israel. Children of Israel, we refer to the Torah as Banim Atem, you are my sons. And that's why we brothers. And I want to end with a story of two brothers. Two brothers who lived away from the parents. They moved into the new world, and eventually the one brother ended up doing really well for himself. He was wealthy, lived in a large mansion, had a big staff working for him, and really, lived very comfortably. Across town, one of the poor neighborhoods, lived the other Jewish immigrant who hadn't done so well for himself, the younger brother. And the younger brother never made it. And lived in poverty and with great difficulty. And as time passed, the brothers grew apart. It seems that the wealthy brother was embarrassed of his poorer brother, but rather than intervene and support him and try to put him on his feet, he kind of forgot that it was his brother. And eventually, the father comes to visit from the old world. But this visit, unlike previous visits, he goes straight to the poor brother's home and makes no attempt to reach his rich son. And the rich son, in fact, is totally unaware that his father's in town until somebody mentions to him, I was at Minyan this morning in shul, and I saw your father's here, but it seems he's staying with your other brother. What's going on? So eventually the rich guy, who probably wasn't a regular at Minyan because his affairs kept him too busy, thinks, well, if he wants to see his father and find out what's going on, he better go to shul. Following morning, he's there for Shachris early, and in walks his father. He walks right up to him. He said, Abba, Tati, father, dad, whatever. I'm so pleased to see that you're in town, but why didn't you come to my house? Why didn't you come and stay? Why don't you make contact? I didn't even know you were here. And the old man looks at him with absolute blank stare and says, do I know you? Do I know you? Why are you calling me dad? To which the son said, of course, I'm your son. You've got several sons, and I'm one of them. And have you lost your mind? Don't you remember who I am? Eventually, the poor brother walks in the door to shul, pulls down his sleeve and says, starts putting on his tefillin, and the rich chap says, Dad, look, this is my younger brother Yankel. So if we brothers, then you've got to be my father. To which the father, with a deep sigh, says, yes, if you two are brothers, then I am your father. And this takes us back to the concept of brotherhood, of being Hashem's children. Yes, sometimes there are tensions, sometimes there are rifts, but after all is said and done, we are brothers. And if we want Hashem to look after us, if we want Hashem to protect us from the enemies on the outside, from all the serious threats, then we need to make sure that if you want him to be our father, that we act towards each other like siblings. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.